Welcome everyone to our Packers-Jets pregame live chat alongside Pete Dougherty. I am Olivia Reiner. The Packers are just 90 minutes away from their second preseason game of the preseason. We'll give you all you need to know from the offense to the defense in just a moment. However, before we begin, as always, you know the drill. You can be a part of our conversation. If you're over on Facebook or YouTube, leave us a question down in the chat. Pete and I would love to hear from you. We'll get to some of your thoughts toward the end of our conversation today. The Packers are going to have a different quarterback under center today. Quarterback Jordan Love still dealing with that shoulder injury to his throwing arm and is unlikely to start today. That means that Kurt Benkert is likely to get the start in place of Love. Benkert came out really hot last week against the Texans. He started with 3 passes for 51 yards. Then everything seemed to go south. He fumbled a snap to running back Kylan Hill, ultimately finished the game with another interception, finished with a 53.5 passer rating. What does Benkert need to do this time around to have an improvement against the Jets?
Yeah, he's going to get a ton of playing time. I would think he'll get at least 3 quarters. Maybe they'll play him the whole game. I just don't know if they'll bring in Jake. Is it Delgado?
Dolegala.
We hardly knew you, Jake. So I don't even know. He's been back, 3 days, 4 days? So I don't even know if they'll play the guy. Benkert's kind of fun to watch because he's got a little bit of a go-for-it, swashbuckling mentality. He just doesn't have the physical talent, obviously, of an Aaron Rodgers or of a Jordan Love. Doesn't have that arm talent. Yeah, I think he ran a 4.95 40. So he's got mobility. Like, he'll escape the pocket and try to do some stuff, but he can't run like those guys. LaFleur said what he's looking for, actually, is for the guy to play in the pocket and to slide around in the pocket instead of taking off at the first sign of trouble and playing by the book. And he does need to show well because, he's not going to make the 53, but my guess is they only keep 2 quarterbacks on the roster, use the roster spot for somebody else, and their 3rd quarterback will be on the practice squad. And he's got a great shot at that as long as he continues to show that he can function in this offense.
Let's take a look at the Packers' offensive line. The Packers have been rotating through a number of starters at each guard position. Last week, we saw John Runyon Jr. at left guard. We saw Ben Braden at right guard. This week, we're going to see rookie Royce Newman start at right guard. Newman played the second half against the Texans. He played about 26 snaps, didn't allow a single sack or a pressure. What do the Packers like about Newman potentially as a starter?
They like his athletic ability. He's got good feet. He's not on the ground. When you watch an offensive lineman, it's always a bad sign if they're on the ground. It means they just don't move their feet real well and they get caught up in traffic and go down. They like his athletic ability for sure. He's getting a real, genuine shot at this job. And I'm sure Lucas Patrick is going to come back fighting. He had a really poor outing the other day, relatively speaking, for a guy who's started a lot of games in the NFL. But the guard thing is just, it's wide open. And if you're just looking for something to watch, because the game is probably going to be kind of ugly, probably very ugly, just watch the guard play. Just focus in on one of the guards and watch him 2 or 3 plays, and then the other guard, and see what you think. Because that's the value of this game for the Packers. Is it's not winning or losing doesn't matter at all. It's how certain players look for whether they'll be a starter, whether they'll make the roster, all those things.
Speaking of the Packers offensive line, they struggled mightily last week against the Texans to create some rushing lanes for the Packers running backs. All 4 Packers running backs combined for 19 touches, just 53 yards. What does the offensive line need to do today in order to make sure they don't repeat history?
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, the starting tackles aren't playing, so it's just a totally different. They're shuffling these guys in and out, so the timing isn't going to be as good as it would be for the regular season. It's probably not going to look very good. I think that's just probably the most likely thing. And I don't know that I would make much of it one way or the other. I still keep thinking back to Aaron Jones' rookie year, and the Packers drafted 3 running backs, and all 3 of those guys, none of them looked good in the preseason games. And it turns out Aaron Jones is a stud. So it's hard to function when you've got all these backups in there and guys who haven't played together a lot. If they run the ball well, that'll probably mean they're getting something good out of those guys on the inside, the guards.
Another position battle to keep an eye on the offense is going to be at wide receiver. Not at the top of the depth chart, but at the bottom of the depth chart. Wide receiver Devin Funchess is dealing still with a hamstring injury. He's likely to be inactive in today's game, which means this is a big game for wide receivers Equinemius St. Brown, Malik Taylor, Reggie Begelton. Taylor stood out last week. He had 5 catches for 50 yards. Of those 3, which is in the lead to currently make the roster?
I'm not sure I'm not sure any of them are because St. Brown keeps getting hurt, and that's the thing that's been hurting him his entire career is, he's already missed time in the preseason. The Packers might decide we just can't depend on this guy to stay healthy. Now this is the chance for him to play a lot. All three of these guys are going to get a ton of playing time. Really, if you're them, you couldn't have asked for a better situation. They're going to get a ton of snaps and a chance to get a lot of balls thrown to them. And even though they're playing with Benkert instead of Love, they'll still get a lot of chances because that 6th and maybe 7th receiver spots are wide open.
Let's flip it over to the defense now. We mentioned the run game for the Packers offense. The Packers struggled also in the run game defensively. The Packers defensive line had a tough time last week against the Texans, allowing Texans rushers to pile up 170 yards. Big yikes, especially considering the fact that the Packers won't have most of their starters out there on the field. Kenny Clark, Dean Lowry likely to be inactive. Even Tyler Lancaster, he was held out of practice on Thursday with an injury. So that being said, which Packers defensive lineman needs to step up in today's game against the Jets?
Yeah, well, with the chance of those guys not playing, I mean, it's open for everybody. Slayton is a kind of an interesting player, a 5th round pick. So he'd be a guy to keep an eye on. Actually, one guy that I'm kind of interested to see is Kamal Martin, just because he has just plummeted down the depth charts. I thought he was a really promising player last year when he was healthy, and he played a fair amount. And this year he's slid down the depth chart. He's probably the 5th linebacker, inside linebacker right now, 4th or 5th, and where I would have thought he'd have been battling for a starting job. Now he missed some camp with an injury, and the running game is a place where he would show up, and that's where he was really active and aggressive. So I'm going to keep my eye on him and see if he can have a jump-out game that would maybe get him rolling back towards some playing time, or if it's just he doesn't know the defense well enough or what's going on, or maybe he's playing too recklessly and this coaching staff just doesn't like it.
Let's head over to Facebook now for some of your questions. Thank you all for joining us. We appreciate it. Hope you're ready for Packers preseason game number 2. Let's start with Mike. He has a question: who is on the bubble today and next week that has to play outstanding to make the 53? We've talked about the competition in the wide receivers room. We've talked a little bit about the competition at guard on the offensive line. What other positions right now are currently facing a little bit of a battle among players?
Oh, there's a cornerback spot or two, a safety spot. That leaps to mind immediately. Are they going to keep 4 tight ends? Would they keep 5? LaFleur likes to play a lot of those guys. So there's probably only, even LaFleur said this. Didn't he say usually there's in the low 40s or so number of roster spots that guys are going to get. And then it's everybody battling over the final 12 or so. Plus, we can't forget there's 16 practice squad spots. And invariably, almost all those guys end up getting promoted sometime during the season. So they're as much a part of the team as the 53. They're just a lot cheaper.
Let's take a question now from Jason on Facebook. Jason wants to know, will the Packers' first-string offense or first-string defense get some reps today? Last week against the Texans, 30 players sat out against the team, and they were mostly, for the most part, they were starters. I believe roughly 3 players that should be considered starters or at least first-string players on the current depth chart were participating in last week's game. How likely is it that we see a similar number of players, mostly starters, held out of today's game?
Yeah, we don't know the plan. I would assume I don't know what you think, I would assume it'll be the same as last week. If Rodgers isn't going to play, there's no reason to play any of the other key guys on offense. So I'm assuming it'll be the same thing. I don't know if you think differently.
I'm not sure. We'll find out. I would think that they would be more conservative than not when it comes to resting or playing their starters. You don't want to get anyone hurt this early.
Different teams do it differently. As just before we went on, I was reading through Pro Football Talk, and the Steelers, Roethlisberger wants to play some. He's got a new coordinator, so he wants the dynamic of getting plays from him and all that. A few plays, but Tomlin's probably going to play him. But I know Rodgers wants absolutely nothing to do with playing in preseason games. And at this point, there's no way, if he doesn't want to play, they are not putting him out there, which means Elton Jenkins and the rest of those guys aren't, and Cobb and all the stars, Devontae Adams, none of those guys are playing.
We won't have the inactives during today's pregame show. However, we will be sure to share it over on PackersNews.com who won't be playing in today's game. We'll find out soon enough. So thank you very much, Jason, for your question. Tom wants to know, are special teams a subject of concern? The Packers have not cracked the top 10 special teams units in the NFL since 2007. It's been a little while since they've had a competent unit. Pete, how can they improve in 2021?
I still think it's mostly comes down, and I could be all wet on this, I think it mostly comes down to the returners. And they haven't had a really good returner for a long time. They had Desmond Howard way back when. They had a couple other guys who their names are escaping me. Roel Preston from the early 2000s. But they just haven't invested in a guy to just be a return guy. They put more emphasis on other things and hope to find a return guy out of their draft picks. But the first thing they're going for is either a cornerback or a receiver, or whatever position the guy plays. So the question is, have they gotten better in the return game with the return personnel? And we'll see with Rodgers. His numbers from college, he looks like a running back, and I think he's good after the catch, but his numbers punt returning from college were nothing great. So my guess is he's just going to be he'll be a decent returner, but better than what they've had. But we'll see, maybe he'll be something different at the NFL level than he was at college. Amari
Rodgers will certainly get some more reps at punt return today, so keep an eye on that during today's game. Let's take a question now from Brent on Facebook. Brent wants to know if cornerback Kevin King is still injured. King has been a participant in this week's practices against the New York Jets. However, he has not been a full participant. No. We've seen him participate in some team periods, not all team periods. The team periods that we have seen King participate in are the two-minute drill. I guess not even the 2-minute drill. No, we haven't seen him in the 2-minute drill. We have seen him in the red zone.
Red zone is what I remember, and it seems like I'd have to go back in my notes, but it's like he's out there for 3 or 4 plays, and that's pretty much it. They're obviously bringing him back with his history of hamstring and groin injuries, they're working him back very slowly from the hamstring injury that he had where he couldn't pass his physical coming into camp.
Now, what does King's seemingly constant injured state, it seems like he's constantly battling through something, or at least he has been for the past season or so. What implications does that have for someone like rookie cornerback Eric Stokes, who is vying for a starting role?
It gives him a ton of playing time, a chance to, if he's talented and a quick study, to get better during camp and to make a run at the starting job. I would still guess King will be the guy out there to start the season, but you never know. And he'll have the chance throughout it's a long season. He'll get his chance somewhere along the line. King will probably get hurt again, and maybe once he's in there, he doesn't give the job back.
We'll find out soon enough. So thank you for your question. Let us move on now. We've got Matt over on Facebook wondering if linebacker Devondre Campbell will play in today's game. Gotta love fans back at Lambeau Field. We're happy to see all of you. So far, Devondre Campbell, how likely is it that he will be active in today's game as someone who is likely to be a starter come time for the regular season?
Don't know about that. I'm trying to remember, was he active last week?
Not to my knowledge.
Yeah, I don't think he was. If he wasn't active last week, you wouldn't think this week. He's going to play a lot, and he may even end up being their lone linebacker in the dime. Right now it's still Chris Barnes, but Campbell's been getting snaps in that too. So he could end up being an important player for him before the year's done.
We'll find out soon enough if Campbell is active today, who the starting inside linebacker duo will be in base defense. That is going to do it for us today, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I will be live with Ryan Wood over on Facebook and YouTube after the game, so make sure you come back, bring your questions. We would always love to hear from you. And make sure you're checking out PackersNews.com for all of your Packers coverage throughout and after the game. For Pete Dougherty,